Hey, hello, everyone. We're going to give just a couple more minutes here to let some more people join. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar with Nerdio and XenTegra. We're going to be talking a little bit about moving to AVD and how do you optimize that migration. My name is Pete Langus. I'm with Nerdio. I've been with the company a number of years now. We officially started it about 4 years ago, but I was with a predecessor company before that. And I'm on our enterprise sales team, been working with customers, hundreds of customers really over the last 4 years, helping them on their AVD journey, both deploying AVD and then managing it. And I'm really happy to be joined today by Randy Price from XenTegra. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Pete, thanks a lot. Thanks for the introduction. Hey guys, Randy Price. Like Pete said, I'm a solutions architect with XenTegra. Been with the company for about a little over 7 years. Been working in the end user compute space for 20-something years now. A lot of experience with AVD. Excited to have Nerdio on today as we talk about, how to optimize, right, your Microsoft AVD deployment. So before we get started, I do have a couple of polls. We pull those up. I'll launch these polls, just get a little feedback, see where you guys currently stand with your AVD initiatives. If you guys can take a moment, give us a little bit of feedback there. And also just kind of curious what you guys are doing today, right, for virtual desktops. If you have a virtual desktop solution in place today, just kind of curious what you guys are using. So we'll give it a moment and then we'll close the poll. I'd like to try to get as much participation as possible here, just so we can get an idea of how to tone the discussion. And while we're doing this, I just want to mention as well throughout this webinar, we do want to make it interactive, right? So if there's questions along the way, feel free to use the chat function. We'll be monitoring that throughout this webinar, and we'll also have some time at the end to discuss any of those questions. But if there's anything pressing, definitely feel free to use that functionality. Right.
I got a little chuckle here. I'm getting a note that says hosts and panelists can't vote, so you know that the game is not rigged here.
Good point.
Yeah.
So we're almost at 70%. I'll just give it another moment here, and let me stop my video so I can pull this up. Give it about another 10 seconds. All right, let me go ahead and end the poll. And I'm going to share the results. There we go. So you can see today, where you guys currently stand with your AVD initiatives. 36% are just starting to investigate AVD. We've got 45% of you guys, right, have already decided to move to AVD, but you haven't actually started yet, right? So that's quite a few there. 9% have piloted some users, and today it's like 9% is already running in production. So, which means you guys probably are looking to try to determine, okay, I've got this deployment, what can I do to optimize it, right? Which is most likely why you guys are here. We look at Other solutions, what customers are currently using today. Looks like we've got about 36% are Citrix customers that are running on-prem today. And then we've got another 27% running VMware, 9% VMware in Azure, right? And we've got 18% that are already utilizing AVD. Interesting results.
Yeah, really interesting. Kind of a good representation with people looking at AVD somewhat down the path. Looks like one person running AVD, and then people who aren't on AVD yet, or maybe in some combination of AVD and something else. Looks like we have a good representation among some of the legacy VDI providers. So yeah, looking forward to the session today. Like Randy said, if you have questions, throw them in the chat and we'll get to those a little later. We have this scheduled for an hour. We'll see if we need the whole hour, but appreciate everyone being here today, and let's dive into it. So we did our polls, so we can fly right through that. Just kind of an agenda. We've done our intros and we did the polls. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about who is Nerdio, and then Randy will tell you a little bit about XenTegra. Then we want to dive into what exactly is AVD and why are people looking at it, excited about it, eager to try it out. We'll get into some AVD market information. It's a little bit dated actually, but I think it's still interesting. And then we'll get into the meat of the presentation today, which is really about some considerations you may have and you want to think through as you go towards AVD. And then we'll talk about how Nerdio can help you optimize both your AVD deployment and then your management as you kind of go down that path. We'll finish up with a case study and then plenty of time at the end for questions. So that's today's agenda. A little bit about Nerdio. Nerdio is a software company. We have some interesting roots. The company sprung out of a managed service provider about 5 years ago. And that managed service provider had done a lot of work with VMware. So we're pretty familiar with virtual desktops and VMware and RDS. And I came on board of the company originally about 8 years ago, and we had just developed a way to kind of package up VMware, a VMware private cloud with servers and virtual desktops and some IT services wrapped around it. And we wrote some automation to help ourselves internally, make it easier to deploy and manage all the existing customers we had. And as I took that and showed it to other service providers, that was my first job with the Nerdio folks. The feedback I got was, that's very cool automation software you guys wrote. And if you could do something similar for Azure, that would be a million times cooler. And so that's what we started doing about 6 years ago. We started writing automation software that lets you set up workloads in Azure more easily and then manage those workloads. And when AVD came out about 4 years ago, we had been working previously with Microsoft a little bit. We saw what was coming. And that's why we developed this product, the Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. We launched it in early 2020. We did not know the pandemic was coming like anyone else, but I often tell people that Nerdio found ourselves in kind of the right place at the right time for a horrible reason. But what it meant was that we had a piece of software that was a pure play with the Microsoft AVD stack and helped a lot of folks quickly get deployed with AVD and then run it. So the net of it over the last 4 years is that we've acquired, as you can see, a lot of customers, a lot of users under management in a very short time frame. I think one thing the pandemic has taught us, besides the ability that we can work remotely, is that things can be done very quickly when they need to be, and a product can mature very quickly and help folks scale out very quickly, much faster than I think we thought possible before the pandemic hit. So that's Nerdio. All in with Microsoft. We don't work with Citrix. We don't work with VMware, with Google, with AWS. It's a pure play Microsoft partnership. And that's kind of the bet we've made. And we work with Microsoft and customers and partners pretty much all day long. Randy, let me turn things over to you because I know folks are anxious to hear about XenTegra and the partnership between us and you guys.
Sure. Appreciate that. So, XenTegra, right? Who are we? We're a value-added reseller. So we really focus on providing, the right solutions with, software, hardware to our customers. We also provide strategic consulting services, right? So with that, whatever the engagement may be, we can provide consulting services across the board, regardless of the project type, right? Whether that's a fixed fee, T&M, a block of hours, we engage with customers a variety of different methods, helping them on their digital transformation journey. We do also offer managed services where we can provide support and even manage, right, your digital workspace environment. We do focus on Microsoft, Citrix, VMware. Of course, we're talking about Microsoft today, and we're a full Microsoft partner, provide full services around Azure and Azure deployment, Azure Virtual Desktop as well. We also offer complimentary assessments. These are assessments, some of you guys may have taken advantage of this in the past. These are assessments that we perform for virtual environments, right? Up to 4 hours. These are complimentary. At the end of these, you'll typically get a deliverable, right, that kind of outlines, how you guys compare to vendor recommended practices. So, all of this was built around just trying to provide and add value and build a community. That's kind of our business model, right? Is to build a community and then try to create solutions that help to serve that community. And that's our founder, Andy Whiteside. That's his motto.
I think one thing that's really important to note about XenTegra is you guys have really deep roots in the end user computing space. You've been around it an awful long time, and as things change and the market changes a little bit, certainly a good guide to navigate some of those changes. Here's what we wanted to talk about first, really, before we dive into some of the considerations. What exactly is Azure Virtual Desktop? So you've heard the term AVD, obviously what Azure Virtual Desktop stands for, but I think why it's different and why it's gotten attention, why it's groundbreaking is it's a native service built in Azure. So when you look at some of the legacy VDI, although you can certainly run it in Azure, you're really just changing where the hardware, if you think of it that way, exists, right? So you're taking what previously might have sat in a data center or in your location, and you've essentially rented that infrastructure in Azure instead. And what makes AVD a little bit different is it was built from the ground up to run as another service in Azure. So there's literally hundreds of services that run in Azure, and AVD is just another one. So from an architecture standpoint, a different way of coming at it. It's very streamlined. It's actually a very elegant design. And over the last 4 years, it's really proven out to be a very robust and reliable service. So different kind of architecture, different way of looking at the world. It's consumption-based, right? So you're running this as a service in Azure. So you're paying for storage, you're paying for compute, but you pay as you go. There's certainly different ways you can address some of the downsides that come with consumption, but the beauty of it, like any cloud service, is it's elastic, it's flexible, you pay for what you use, and certainly scalable. The security that comes with it, it's kind of funny as I look back at my career in technology over the last 10 years, well, much beyond that, sorry to say, I'm dating myself there. But if you look back 10 years when public cloud was kind of coming to the forefront, you had a lot of people that were very, very scared and apprehensive to go into the public cloud because they were very scared, I guess you'd say, about putting workloads in the public cloud from a security standpoint. And now that script has really flipped, and you look at folks like Google, like AWS, like Microsoft, who have probably the best security and personnel and techniques and so forth that money can buy, securing your workloads. People feel really awfully good about having those workloads in Azure. On the economic side, AVD's licensed differently because it's consumption based. It can the cost and the economics can look much different. And so what people have found, especially if they look at pooled desktops, which is essentially using shared resources, it's economically very friendly, orders of magnitude less on a per user basis than people have seen with legacy VDI. So that's been a big selling point for a lot of folks. And then it complements some of the other Microsoft offerings, which include Windows 365, also known as a cloud PC, And they've recently announced GA or close to GA on Azure Stack HCI, which is essentially the ability to run Azure on-prem and pair it with Azure, traditional Azure in the cloud, and get kind of the best of both worlds in a hybrid environment there for certain workloads. So, that's really what AVD is all about. And kind of a quick market study that we have here. And again, I apologize, this is a little bit dated. This was done almost 2 years ago now, but you can see that the forecast on the market, it's a $35 billion market, and we're definitely seeing a trajectory towards that. You can see here 500 IT managers surveyed, a quarter of them had AVD. It looks like from our poll today, that number is a little bit less, but certainly the 58% looking to deploy within 2 years kind of lines up with what the poll we saw. What's interesting here is that 3/4 of the deployments were under 1,000 users, which in itself maybe isn't surprising. But the flip side of that, the other side of the coin is, better than 25% of the deployments are over 1,000 users. So it proves out that, and this is going back 2 years, that there's some pretty large scale deployments out there with AVD, and really lends itself to the talk track that AVD is ready for prime time, and certainly enterprise ready. They also found some of the common concerns are what the end user experience is going to look like, security, and cost. And those are some of the things we'll delve into today as we look at considerations as you move to AVD. So Randy, you've had some experience here, and you've seen kind of what's happened in the marketplace. These are some of the things that we've seen out there. First question that people kind of ask themselves, or maybe leadership asks, is why are we considering moving? What's driving this? What's the move? What's it going to accomplish? Things like that. The investment that's needed, what's it going to cost? What are we going to need in terms of infrastructure? The end user experience. No one wants to put something out there that the end users are going to be not happy with, that are going to be fighting you on it. They're going to be complaining about it. They're going to be sending emails in the middle of the night about that they couldn't log in. Really important. Probably should have put it top of the list. How are you going to implement it? And then how are you going to manage the environment once it's been deployed? So these are some of the considerations that we come across. There's probably other ones as well. But we thought for today, we'd focus on these 6. And Randy, let's talk about the first one. The question that comes up, why are you moving? Why are you looking to AVD? Did you just decide that it's a cool 3-letter acronym and we want to move to it? Or is there something more going on?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, right? And I would say definitely I've seen an uptick, right, in customers either evaluating, piloting, or have already decided, right, that they're wanting to move to Azure Virtual Desktop. And I believe there's several reasons for this. First, we definitely see a trend, right? Customers are looking at a cloud-first strategy, right? They the days of having, depending upon the size, right, having a data center, everything running on-prem. Now customers are looking to utilize a cloud-first strategy where they're wanting to host these workloads in a public cloud like Azure, to get some of the benefits, right? The flexibility, the performance, the agility, right? Being able to provision those workloads, paying for only what's consumed, as well as providing those workloads and those resources closer to the end users, right? Wherever the end users reside. So, that's definitely one sort of scenario there. Another major considerations, renewals, cost. We definitely see that going up, right? Everyone's looking to just save money, especially existing, desktop virtualization customers, right? So they're looking for ways to potentially save money with the increasing cost. So we see customers evaluating. I've already got these entitlements. Potentially from a licensing perspective, why not utilize those, right? What would that look like? And not to mention the last thing, I'm just going to point out here, Pete, if you want to speak to any of these others, but just market dynamics, right? There's a lot of customers that are just really uneasy today because either they're using Citrix today, and again, kind of already alluded to, some of the price changes and some of the other things just happening within Citrix, as well as from a VMware standpoint, right? Just the acquisition of Broadcom and just the recent news around, what's happening from a Horizon standpoint. Customers are are now just investigating alternatives, right? So they're really starting to, look at what are my alternatives. And the thing that keeps coming up over and over is, Azure Virtual Desktop, because again, could be included from a licensing standpoint. May already have licensing entitlements for things like Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session. So, they start investigating that as a potential option.
Yeah, I think we're living in really interesting times in the end user computing world. When the pandemic hit, the question, why are you moving? It was kind of like, because we have to.
Right.
You had a lot of organizations that needed a remote work solution and they couldn't get their hands on hardware. They didn't have staff available maybe to get a whole new environment set up with hardware, data center space, and so forth. And so AVD became a very easy path for folks to get set up with remote work. And once, I'm knocking on my wood table here, once the pandemic settled down, what we found was folks looking a little more strategically at moving to AVD. And those discussions moved into the realm more about cost and trying to get out of the data center business. And now what we're seeing is a lot of stuff driven by market dynamics, a lot of interest where folks are, as you said, Randy, maybe unsettled with what's going on in the market. And maybe they move to AVD, maybe they don't, but they're at least taking a look at it and hedging their bets and seeing what AVD is about to see if it's viable for, either a complete takeout or maybe a portion of the business. We see a lot of folks that find an initial use case for AVD, and you'll see that down there in the bullets, but the big one that pops up all the time is third-party contractors. Mm-hmm. There's third-party contractors that maybe need some access to the environment, and a company doesn't necessarily want to keep investing in more licensing from a legacy VDI provider, more hardware, data center space, and so forth. And so they look at AVD or even sometimes Windows 365 as a way to get that third-party contractor onboarded into the environment with a lot less friction than doing a more traditional model. So yeah, without a doubt, interesting times we live in. So that's kind of the, where are you starting? Why are you moving? What's driving this? And that's the first question to answer. And then it's kind of like, okay, yeah, we think we'd like to try AVD out, but what's the investment that we're going to need? And it really falls into a number of buckets, right? So there's startup costs. And although it is consumption-based, there's still potentially the need for some CapEx. Maybe you need to invest in some new end user devices. Maybe you want to use something like an iGel piece of software, or even in the old days, I'm going back a year or two, iGel hardware to repurpose existing hardware. But there could be some CapEx that rolls into it. From a hardware software standpoint, but then certainly pro services. So are you going to need some assistance, whether that's internal cost centers or external, but you may need some extra pairs of hands in order to, to do that migration. Once everything is stood up, there's OpEx, right? So there's a consumption, there's a support. And when we get to the next slide, I'll show you a little bit about the Azure, what AVD costs kind of looked at, what they look like and how they break down. But there's that ongoing cost in order to run AVD. There's also the investment in time. So, a tool like Nerdio can certainly help speed up a deployment, but there is a certain amount of planning that goes into something like this. The typical way folks move into AVD is they do a pilot, they try a small set of users, and then they scale out from there. So this is not typically an overnight cutover. This is something that happens over time, and that's something that needs to be factored in as an investment. And then there's staffing. So are you going to need external help? Are you going to do everything internally? If you do it internally, do you have the right staff in place to do that? Do they need a third-party tool? Is this going to take away from other projects? Do you have enough people to do what you need to do? So a lot of considerations that really go into the investment of it. There's some good tools out there to help with ROI and other things along those lines. But it's definitely one of the top considerations that we see. In terms of typical costs for an Azure Virtual Desktop, we probably should have done this as a poll to see, if people are on the right track. But you can see here that, most of the cost is really about compute, 70%, so the lion's share, right? There's some other things that go into kind of supporting a virtual desktop, but compute is the big one. And that's the big lever where you have the ability to get some optimization and really make the cost very economical. And when I mentioned earlier about it levels that really have not been seen before, if you're looking at multi-session, which is essentially taking a VM, splitting it among a number of users instead of a single user, and then having the ability to scale that VM or pool of VMs up and down depending on usage, we've seen per user costs, sub $10 per user per month. So when you compare that to legacy VDI, when you compare that to the cost of going out and buying a laptop and supporting a laptop, it's orders of magnitude lower than what we've seen before, and pretty exciting stuff. Let's jump over to infrastructure. So again, these projects don't happen overnight. There's things that have to be in place. Randy, kind of walk us through what you need in terms of infrastructure if you wanted to set up AVD.
Sure. So there's a couple of things, right? One, of course, we need an Azure tenant, right? So do you have an existing Azure tenant in place? So there's definitely some things here to just consider around your deployments and things that we typically take into consideration. Do you have an existing Azure tenant, right? Do you have networking, VNets in place? What applications are being migrated, right? And what are their specific requirements? Do you require GPUs? What are any sort of specific requirements around those specific applications? Where are those applications, where does the backend data reside, right? Is it on an application server? Maybe there's a database server. Where does that database server sit? If it's a client server app, those are some of the sort of things to take into consideration. Not to mention, where's your user data going to reside, right? Are we going to utilize something like Azure Files, right, for FS Logics for our profiles? Then determining what size instances are going to be required. Going back again to your conversation around the type of virtual desktop, are we going to utilize a multi-session where we have one VM, where we have multiple users logging in, right? That could be a Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session, could be a server OS. Are we going to provide more persistent virtual desktop or non-persistent, right, where each user has their own dedicated VM? There's just, again, some of the sort of considerations taken into account. What about authentication, right? Are you guys using Intra ID? Are you going to utilize for MFA? What are the MFA requirements there? If you have an on-premises data center, right, with applications or resources that users still need to access because everything hasn't been migrated to Azure, right? What sort of network connectivity is in place? Do you have an express route? Do you have a site-to-site VPN? Several things there that definitely needs to be taken into consideration when we start talking around Azure Virtual Desktop. From a pilot standpoint, users are always looking to, when they first want to get into AVD, kind of what you mentioned earlier, Pete, around going through from a pilot perspective. These are some of the things that we work with customers on and try to help and have some of these sort of design decisions around what does this look like? Because all of these sort of items can definitely impact user experience, right? And so, but there is, definitely several things here to take into consideration, not to mention just, what are the DR requirements, right? Or business continuity requirements in place? Are you looking to deploy desktops in a single region, multi-region? There's some things there to consider as well, but.
Yeah, it's as you kind of look through the list, you realize that it's not as simple as just standing a VM up in Azure. There's a lot that needs to go into this and a lot of thought, particularly as you look at environments that span multiple regions in the US or globally and have different functional groups. It pretty quickly gets pretty complicated. So some well thought out infrastructure and architecture makes sense. Next one we're going to cover is the end user experience. And I think I mentioned earlier, the last thing that anybody wants is an end user who can't log in or has a really slow desktop. That's a really good way to kill an AVD pilot and an AVD rollout. So end user experience is really, really important. And, it starts with use cases. So what we've seen that's been really helpful for customers as they look at rolling out AVD is to look at the different personas and the different types of users that need to be supported. So The first one that I always start with, I guess, is called what I call the worker bee. So someone who's typically using web browser and the Office apps and not really doing a lot of heavy lifting or anything specialized. That's one persona. Another persona might be what we call a power user, engineering person who needs GPU, graphic artist, something like that. And then you'll have the other kind of power user, which is the executive, where you make sure that that person has a dedicated desktop, high powered, so that they never have any kind of sniff of latency or bad user experience. So taking the different personas and figuring out use cases, one of the use cases could be that third-party contractor, but figuring out and understanding what those are is, I think, really important to designing and ensuring a good end user experience. Devices, you need to look at, are you going to be having folks leverage existing hardware that they have? And again, maybe you use something like an iGel to update those and repurpose. Maybe you're giving them something new, maybe it's BYOD, but you want to think through what the end user device looks like and how you're going to make sure that that doesn't encourage any bad behavior or bad experience for the end user. And that's where a tool like ControlUp, something else that gives you end-to-end monitoring, can help you to make sure that you have some visibility into folks that aren't having the best experience. Applications are going to be really important. So typically when someone's looking at an implementation, we'll encourage them to look at the applications they have, make sure they're going to run okay in AVD. And there's a great tool called Remo 3 that can help evaluate that. But essentially, you want to figure out what that path is going to be to get existing applications into AVD, and then how you're going to deliver them. And there's a number of ways to do that. There's something called MSIX App Attach, which gives you the ability to have different applications assigned to different folks. There's app masking within FS Logic, which lets you create an image and then only deliver certain applications to certain users. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but making sure the right applications get to the right users or set of users is really important to that end user experience. Images factor into this as well. Some folks will push out a single image to the whole organization. Other folks will create certain images and custom images for different people or different groups. It can very quickly get complicated, but you want to make sure that, again, the right people have the right access to the right applications. And then performance really trumps all. The performance has to be there. And one good way of ensuring that is to make sure that if you're using pooled desktops, you're architecting it correctly to make sure there's enough horsepower at all times to deliver a good end user experience. So you want to balance good performance and get good cost optimization and a reasonable cost without sacrificing that performance. And we'll talk a little bit about how Nerdio can help with that. But end user experience, super, super important for successful projects. Randy, we touched on this a little bit, but walk us through, if you decide you're going to implement AVD, what are some of the things that you need to be aware of? Like, what are the steps? What are some of the gotchas? How do you measure success? These are all things that kind of roll into it, right?
Sure. And I think that's, this is the critical component, right? It's, you've decided now that you want to pilot or move into AVD, what does that look like? And a lot of that comes down to just getting, creating a successful design, understanding what your success criteria is and what use cases you have, right? So, from a scope, timing, resource perspective, we engage with a lot of customers on this specific thing, right? We have a lot of expertise in this area, and it's just really, coming in, understanding your current landscape. Is this a greenfield opportunity? Maybe you haven't utilized a desktop virtualization solution, and this is your first attempt. Maybe you have Citrix or VMware, right? You're wanting to migrate off of those. So getting an understanding of your use case, how you guys are utilizing the solution today, what are your users used to? Again, going back to some of those other questions and things that we took in from a consideration perspective, having some of those sort of topics, reviewing those from a discovery design perspective, just understanding what's your requirements, what's your current landscape, what is your objective, right? understanding that. Because with that, then what we can do is we can assess your current environment and create a design based upon that assessment to meet your objectives and your success criteria. So if your success criteria, for example, is to provide a Windows 11 multi-session desktop to remote users, ensuring that we can do that and providing, whatever application sets those users need, right? Ensuring performance meets, the expectations there. And again, part of this, from an engagement standpoint, ensuring, we have project management along the way. XenTegra does this, right? So, if you guys are looking at really evaluating from a POC pilot perspective, Azure Virtual Desktop, definitely look to engage XenTegra. We can help you. We have a team, our team of experts can help from a scoping perspective, scoping the deployment to ensure success. Again, during our engagement, we'll assess your current landscape, we'll review your business objectives, we'll provide recommendations on things like sizing, design, right? Security, how to secure the environment, just Azure cloud governance and your strategy there, as well as assist with any sort of migration. Again, if you're looking to migrate from one of these legacy desktop virtualization solutions, we can provide you with the guidance. We've done this many times. So just ensuring that we're trying to meet your success.
I think one other thing you guys do really well is as folks are looking at potentially moving from legacy VDI, you can show them what it means to move into AVD. And if there's any gaps or any differences or any positives, I think you can do a great job of kind of pointing that out. So people know it's not necessarily a blocker, but it's just maybe making awareness or benefits, as the case may be, of some of the things that may change as they move into AVD.
Correct. Yeah, we could definitely, like I said, this is kind of our bread and butter, right? Just desktop virtualization in general. We're familiar with all these solutions. So when we have customers that are utilizing Citrix today, or maybe VMware Horizon today, and they're looking at AVD, we can definitely talk about, your current situation, how you guys are currently utilizing the solution, and what those differences are if you were to move to AVD, right? And what's the positives there, and just things to take into consideration so that we can make sure that you guys are successful. So.
Awesome. Okay, our last consideration. So let's say you've made the move to AVD, you've deployed it, but now you're thinking about how am I going to manage this environment? And when you look at AVD, there's a lot of things to manage, but three of the big ones are images, applications, and then what are called host pools. And so there's definitely ways to do that manually through Azure's native tools. What a lot of Nerdio customers have found is that managing an image, updating an image in AVD is a very laborious process. Managing applications is a laborious process. Managing pools is a somewhat laborious process. And so the ability to add a third-party tool like Nerdio on top and maybe use a managed service provider like XenTegra to help with some of this can be a very powerful way to go. Endpoints will need to be managed potentially. Again, our friends at iGel have some nice tools to help with that. You need to think through who's going to be managing the environment. Is it an outside firm? Is it internal? Is it some combination of that? Are you taking folks that maybe are used to managing a Citrix or VMware environment, and are they going to go be able to make that transition over to AVD? What does the learning curve look like? And then are there integrations that need to be managed? So we've had several customers who have looked at integrating AVD into some other products such as ServiceNow, and is that something that's achievable? So a lot of different considerations and important considerations as you go into kind of day two support and managing this environment, particularly at scale. So we've run through a number of considerations, and now I guess it's time where I get to do my little editorial on Nerdio. But we essentially created Nerdio because we saw what Microsoft had built with AVD. We are definitely excited about the architecture, being a native cloud service. We were excited about the economics that it provides, but we also noticed that out of the box, AVD natively is a little bit harder to manage than maybe it will be someday. This was particularly true when it first came out. when AVD first came out, well, first of all, it was called WVD, but when it first came out, there were folks that were literally taking days or weeks to get their first desktop up and running. So there was a really big challenge with trying to get AVD deployed. And so the first thing that we built with the Nerdio Manager was a deployment engine. And so we standardized the deployment. We built it upon our experience in the past working with Azure workloads. We built it upon best practices from Microsoft and others. And we gave the software the ability to help people deploy their first desktop in about 2 hours. Now, we talked about that Azure needs to be set up and so forth and networking, everything else. But assuming that's done, if you have that ready and you deploy Nerdio, we can have your first desktop up and running in 2 hours or less. That's kind of what we found. Our fastest, I think, is 35 minutes. But a very quick and easy deployment, time proven, battle tested. What we found, again, going back to being at the right place at the right time for the wrong reason, we found when folks were in the midst of the pandemic and needed to roll out something very quickly, they came to Nerdio, and there were cases where we literally helped people get AVD stood up overnight. So I'm not advocating that people need to move that fast, but if you need to move fast, if you don't have resources available to maybe help you with an AVD pilot or project or rollout, or if you've had a security breach, not in AVD, but outside of AVD, like one of our soon-to-be customers had a couple of weeks ago, we can help you very quickly migrate into AVD, or at least get it up and running to test it out. So the quick and easy deployment was really the first thing that we built out. We then really turned our attention to simplifying management. So in terms of we talked about the deployment, but ongoing management. So creating images, updating images, managing images, assigning different images to different host pools or different people, getting the right applications packaged into different people, different functional groups. These are all things that Nerdio has built into our software. So the mantra is that you should really be able to do most day-to-day tasks in 3 clicks or less. You can't do that in the native portal. My running joke is that we've made the Nerdio Manager so easy that a sales guy can probably go in and manage a lot of environments. So that's, amazing and frightening at the same time, but it is just about that easy to do a lot of these day-to-day tasks. So Nerdio has really built out a lot of automation to help manage environments. And the cool thing about it is we're constantly adding to the tool and adding more features, and it's all based upon feedback from Microsoft and feedback from end users. A little bit of engineering input too, but really the product continues to evolve based on what our customers are asking us to do. A recent example, we just started providing different color schemes for the admin console. So if you have one console that's been used for dev and one that's been being done for production, you can color code those differently so people know what's what. Great suggestion. Put it into the queue, got developed, within a number of weeks or maybe a couple months. Another example, Microsoft asked us to develop a specific feature to let you do what we call cross-cloud capability. So have identity in commercial cloud, say, and workloads in GovCloud. Can't do that natively without an awful lot of scripting and workarounds. We built that out, again, in a number of weeks based on Microsoft's suggestion and ask. Certainly shows the speed and flexibility and range and ability of Nerdio to pivot and iterate very quickly and satisfy what our customers are looking for. So a couple examples there. This is all this automation is geared towards really increasing reliability. We have something built in called broken host fixing. So if a host VM goes down, we can sense that, we can fix it. Amazing kind of stuff. So that's on the management side. And then on the optimization side, we talked a little bit about end user experience and how important performance is. We've talked about cost. What you really want to do ideally is get the best performance at the lowest cost. So you have an environment with AVD that's consumption based. You certainly don't want to run it 24/7 at full capacity. I mean, that's one way that you could ensure really good performance, but the cost would completely blow your budget out. And so what we've done at Nerdio is created this auto scaling engine that lets you turn the environment down, turn it off in some cases, if need be, turn VMs off within a host pool. But essentially, we let the environment shrink and grow depending on what is being dictated at any time. It could be a CPU trigger that lets us scale things down or up. It could be time of day. We all know a lot of people don't work, Saturday, Sunday. So we could take the environment and scale it down. And then Monday morning, we could have it ready to go and scale up because everybody comes in and checks their email and we have this boot storm, and you certainly want to make sure there's good performance with that. But essentially what we do is let the environment shrink and expand as needed. And typical savings are 50% or more versus an unoptimized environment. We have some customers that are saving literally hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on their Azure consumption because they're using their environment smartly without sacrificing performance. So that's really what we're about. We also have support for Windows 365 and Azure Stack HCI. So you get kind of that single pane of glass to be able to manage any kind of virtual desktop that is in the Microsoft suite. I'll wrap it up with sorry, Randy.
Sorry, I was just going to mention as well, you kind of spoke on the fact of the ease of management, right? And I just wanted to mention, I can't tell you the number of times I've engaged with customers that were looking at AVD and going through that process. And, on these engagement calls, right, even Microsoft will bring up, have you looked at Nerdio, right? So, that's sort of a testament right there just around the fact that even Microsoft recognizes the value and some of the things that you guys bring to the table just from a management perspective. So just wanted to comment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me wrap things up with a quick case study. So this is a global insurance company. They've been using Citrix on-prem, and they were really, they had some renewals coming up. They were really looking to see if they could reduce some costs. Pretty small team for the project, and really concerned about, could this small team really manage an AVD environment at scale going forward? A lot of users and a very compressed time frame, so they needed to move fast. So we worked with Microsoft to set up a POC. We kind of proved out that AVD was a good solution for them, and Nerdio was a good way to manage it. We talked about really the best practices, what they would need to look like for managing an environment of that size as they scaled out. And so we really formed a partnership with this customer. And one of the things they helped us do is they were very reliant on ServiceNow for provisioning new users. And so we helped them build out an integration that would let them automate the provisioning of a new desktop using Nerdio to provision that in AVD. So these are the kinds of things that we can put together. And now this is part of the product, having that API for integrations into third-party tools like ServiceNow. But these are the kinds of things that we can do and build into the product to help a customer. The results here, kind of speak for themselves. Lots of users, about a third of them in any given month are active. That small staff is able to manage the environment, and the ROI is about 3 times what they're paying for Nerdio. So a really good return on investment there. Granted, this is a very large, complex customer. We also work with customers on the other side of the scale that are a little bit smaller, but still seeing some really good value in Nerdio from that deployment, management, and optimization standpoint. All right, let's move on to see if we have any questions.
Yeah, it looks like, Pete, we got a couple. So one is someone had asked if we were going to share this recording. We can definitely do that right following this webinar. So we'll get that out.
That's an easy
Pete, yep. And Pete, I had another question real quick. Is there a certain number of EUC seats that is the tipping point that AVD starts looking more attractive versus an on-prem solution?
Wow, that's a great question. And like so many answers in life, the answer is it depends. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. The things that come into play are where folks are. Well, if you're looking at net new hardware, then I would say in most cases, AVD is going to be considerably less over the life of that. If you still have some life left in the hardware, then it becomes a little bit more of an exercise. It's part science, part art. Nerdio has some good tools to help you look at what, and Microsoft has some of these tools as well. I'm sure XenTegra can help. Additionally, but essentially we can help model out what that environment might look like with AVD. Given some inputs, we look at things like concurrent users, number of hours worked per day, what the workloads need to look like. And then we can get a good idea of what a per user cost look like, and then look at that for the number of users and kind of help you do a compare and contrast. So yeah, it's hard to answer one or the other. I'd say in general, AVD is gonna be equal or less, but actual mileage may vary just a little bit.
Yeah, that's where that, kind of doing that assessment, right? Or cost analysis.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
That's something XenTegra can help with. That's something you're interested in, diving into a little deeper. Just understanding, what's your current cost model? What's some of those considerations in place? Are you using it? Are you using Azure today, right? What entitlements are included, with your licensing today? You may own licensing to utilize AVD, and if so, it's the compute and just getting an understanding of, what those workloads are, what's the requirements there, right? Are you looking at pay as you go or more reserved instances? And, there's some things there that just take into consideration, but yeah, we can definitely help you navigate that conversation if that's something you guys want to take.
What else do we have here?
Cool.
Does Nerdio offer capabilities for automating Azure images, provisioning and configuration management with a version control approach? I do not know the answer to that one off the top of my head. We'll circle back and get an answer on that one. I know that imaging and updates to images are a huge pain point. So I'm going to go a little over my skis here and say we definitely have some help in this specific question, but I'll get you a precise answer on that one. We have a work group app calling. Then we have another good question. Where I'm going to be 0 for 2 on this one. We'll have to get an answer back on that one as well. Great question, though. All right, so let's see if we have any other questions here. Randy, any more in the chat? Let's see.
That's all I see at the moment. Yep. I was just looking, so I just was able to pull up the other question. So the UPS shipping, you see, issue is the app is designed to run 2 instances on the same VM at the same time. It is not multi-session. Do you have that privilege? More than one user. Typically in these multi-session environments, right, there's not isolation, right? So in the sense that, it kind of depends on the application. I guess we'd have to look into that a little deeper to understand, what that specific requirements are. If it runs 2 instances, are they running under the user's context? Is there any sort of issue with those running in a multi-session? That's something we would most likely have to look at and kind of take that offline and maybe have a deeper discussion. I guess I'd say it depends, right? There's potentially some things that can be done there, but just getting a better understanding of the application and exactly how it's operating I think it's going to be crucial in that point.
So I think when we send up the follow-up email to today's session, we'll post these questions and the answers with them.
Yep.
So that we have that. Okay, looks like we're out of questions. So Randy, I know you've been waiting. I think I jumped ahead here for a second too. So
go ahead.
I know you've been waiting to talk about this. This is pretty exciting. This is like
all
of you that stuck around to the end. It was worth the wait.
That's right. That's right. So for those of you that are familiar with XenTegra in the past, right, we've always had a work has no boundaries sort of giveaway. This past year, we gave away 2 Ford Broncos. We've just recently announced our new giveaway for 2024. So this is our work has no boundaries giveaway. We're giving away a dream vacation for you and a guest to Hawaii. So that's pretty exciting. You can go to workhasnoboundaries.com to learn how to qualify. And actually, if you want to go to the next slide, there's a couple different ways to qualify, but if you attend a meeting and if you go out to the site and mention that you want to attend a meeting to discuss your AVD project with Nerdio and XenTegra, that gets you entered in, right? So then you're entered into that drawing. So definitely go out. If you have a project you want to, you want to investigate further, definitely go out and register. Someone's going to win a trip to Hawaii. Could be you, right? So definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, exciting.
Yep. Very exciting.
Very good. So, last but not least, if you want to learn more, here's contact information for Randy and me. Just drop us an email. We'll also have a follow-up, like I said, where we answer the questions that came up, and we'll get the link to the recording as well, I believe.
Yep. Very good. Pete, definitely appreciate your time today.
Likewise. And thanks everybody for attending. Really appreciate it. And look forward to continued discussions.
Yep. Thank you, guys.